So we're here. We're finally at the second part of the iceberg. The first part covered what, like 5 tiers? So we're finally getting into covered 6 tiers. What am I saying? So we're finally getting into the last 4. And yeah, while the distribution's not like great, 6 parts in one, 6 tiers in one, 4 in the other. This set of tiers is a bit more out there and a bit more in depth as well. Okay, when I did the recordings, I think the first part was 30 minutes cut down into 25, and then the second recording was, even though it was only four sections, the second recording was like 25 minutes itself. So by the time I get this edited down, it'll probably be around I'm not sure, even with this intro, it'll probably be about like 25. And so without further ado, let's get into the second part. Spouse Revival Quest. A cut side quest titled The Replacement can be found in Fallout 4's game files. People have theorized, based on the name and quest icon, that the objective of the quest was to create a synth version of your spouse after they had died in the prologue. It's just an interesting piece of cut content. Walking corpses. I think this refers to the Y-17 trauma harnesses found in the Big Empty. The suits were made with the goal of extracting wounded soldiers on the battlefield. An empty suit would walk itself to a soldier, unable to move, envelop them inside the suit, and bring them to a medical facility. The suits would save lives and keep medics out of the line of fire. However, they would severely malfunction and engage in combat indiscriminately. When the Great War destroyed life as we know it, these suits would envelop the corpses around the area and become hostile entities around the Big Empty. I've made a video about them in the past, and they're quite terrifying, knowing that these people were likely trapped in the suits, unable to get help, and would perish, living out their final moments unable to control their own motor functions. The true crater of Jet. This has some controversy for no real reason. Myron of Fallout 2 claims to have been the creator of the chem Jet, but in Vault 95 Jet can be found. What the heck? Jet was pre-war? Why would Bethesda retcon this? As simply as I can state it, this was not a retcon. Or maybe it was, but I don't think it was. Myron is simply lying about creating Jet. Even the Chosen One with high enough intelligence can call him out on his BS, saying that anyone with a proficient understanding of chemistry could discover the formula. It's more likely that Myron merely either rediscovered Jet or just found a recipe for it. Then he found ways to make it faster and cheaper. A teenage pharmacologist and predator isn't the most honest person in the world. Fallout New Vegas post-game content. Fallout 4 lets you continue to play after the main story ends. Fallout 3 lets you continue to play after the main story ends, albeit through a DLC. Fallout New Vegas does not. It's just a theory that the game was supposed to continue after the main story, but due to time constraints associated with the game, any planned post-game content was cut. Special characters of the Mojave. This is the theory that major characters in the Mojave represent the different special attributes. The breakdown that I saw was Kaisar with strength, Ulysses is perception, he sees the errors in the current leaders of the major factions. The courier is endurance. Even after taking a bullet to the head, the courier doesn't seem to give up. The king is charisma. I mean, come on, it's right there, it's pretty obvious. Kimball is intelligence. He leads the most successful post-war nation. Benny is agility. He's a runner and a track star. And of course, House is luck. The house always wins, baby. The ghoul gene. I think this refers to the age-old question of, is ghoulification genetic? That is to say, is there some gene that determines if extended radiation exposure simply kills you, like it does with the protagonists of the game, or does it turn you into a ghoul? And then, is there a further gene that makes you a feral ghoul instantly, or become, what's the opposite of a feral ghoul? A tame ghoul? An intelligent ghoul? I'm actually not sure. When I Google it, it tells me tame, but calling them a tame ghoul seems kind of weird. So maybe it's intelligent ghoul? Anyway, it boils down to, is there a gene that affects ghoulification? and honestly, the lore surrounding ghouls is a bit muddy. While most ghouls were created or born out of the aftermath of the Great War, there are some cases of pre-war ghouls like Eddie Winter and Desmond Lockhart. The two primary ways of becoming a ghoul is gradual and constant radiation exposure, like those of Necropolis, and just being at ground zero for a nuclear explosion but surviving, like Moira if Megaton blows up. I think the ghoul gene is a decent theory that explains away some of the questions surrounding ghoulification. It's not a bad one. Tier 7. Child Killer Reputation. Yep, this was a reputation title in Fallout 1 and 2 because in those games you could harm children. Having the title would drop your initial reaction to good and evil NPCs by 30 points, and also bounty hunters would try and stop your reign of terror. The title is also notorious for being the only Vault Boy image to ever be cut from Fallout 2. The title's icon went from an illustration of kicking a woman in her stomach to a comically evil Vault Boy running away from a mob of angry folk. Fallout 4 is a hallucination. This is one of those typical crackpot theories you'd find on any iceberg. I'm guessing the theory goes that the true experiment of Vault 111 was one dealing with psychoactive drugs or something. Instead of the cryo chambers, the chambers the residents of 111 climb into would actually keep them in some sort of REM state where they could live out any sort of reality. And then the reality the sole survivor pursues is one where the events of Fallout 4 happen. Could you imagine how wild it would be if Todd Howard was just like, yep, 4 was a hallucination? Like, what? I think I'd be a little upset. Fallout 3 predicted Deepwater Horizon. A gaming folklore was spread around the early days of the internet about a radio station in Fallout 3 which predicted several real-known events. Starting out as a creepypasta, the Numbers station tells the story of a player who killed Three Dog, the Galaxy News radio host. Later, his radio started to act weird and would play random pieces of code instead of the regular songs. The radio station was making grim predictions. I'll read out some supposed deciphered messages. Washed the car today. Maybe Chinese for dinner. I can't believe it. They've actually done it. Not long left. The noise. I can't take that noise anymore. I have a pistol in the attic. The Queen has died today. The world mourns. On days like this, we are all Brits. The date given for this entry was March 19th, 2014. As far as I know, the Queen's still alive today, so it's not a correct prediction. But there were actually two predictions that did come true. A message titled, "What You Talking About? You Will Be Missed," referenced the death of actor Gary Coleman, and the message "Accident in the Gulf" correctly predicted the 2010 BP oil spill. It's at this point that I should note that the final date of July 6, 2027 was deciphered, but no message accompanied it. So, mark your calendars, boys. New Vegas is a dream. Similar to other dream or hallucination theories, the events of New Vegas being dreamed is based on a few key pieces of evidence. The theory goes that the events of the game take place in the courier's head after they'd been shot by Benny. It speculates that the reason why the courier only goes by the courier is because they forgot their own name. The reason why everyone is so helpful in your hunt for Benny is because the courier's own ideal world is inside his own mind. The theory always comes back to asking the question of why the courier? Why is it that the courier has to be the diplomat for all these major factions? Why does the courier have to deal with the boomers? Why does the courier have to deal with the cons? The theory claims that the courier is at the center of all the events of the Mojave because it's taking place in their own mind. It's a bit of a nutty theory, and it doesn't hold up after much scrutiny, but the dream and hallucination theories are always fun in a kind of meta way. From a meta point of view, the courier is at the center of all the major events of New Vegas because if the main character of an RPG wasn't at the center, it wouldn't be as fun. The game would be hours shorter if once you got your revenge on Benny and gave the platinum chip to House, he just bid you on your way. Moving on to a big one. Vault numbers tied to the Bible. I was most excited to research this one. An IGN forum board made an interesting discovery back in 2015. The user Arsano Lace writes about the newly released Fallout 4 trailer at the time and was curious about why Vault 111 was chosen as the number. They did some Googling hoping to find scientific importance, but instead found a link to a website about the Psalms. It's then that they had a revelation. The Psalms described the Fallout vaults. Psalms 101. I will walk in my house with a blameless heart. I will set before my eyes no vile thing. The deeds of faithless men I hate, they will not cling to me. Men of perverse heart shall be far from me. Whoever slanders his neighbor in secret, him I will put to silence. No one who practices deceit will dwell in my house. No one who speaks falsely will stand in my presence. Now, I'm not really a religious person, so pardon me if I misinterpret any of this, but it sounds like the narrator is someone who believes themselves to be infallible, someone who will put a stop to slander and has zero tolerance for rule breakers. It sounds a lot like 101's overseer, Alphonse Almodovar. He's a tyrannical overseer who runs his vault extremely strict. The rabbit hole goes deeper though. Let's move on to Vault 92, a place where the world's best musicians were meant to be housed, but instead, a rather sinister experiment was performed using white noise. Psalms 92. It is good to praise the Lord, and make music to your name, O Most High, proclaiming your love in the morning, and your faithfulness at night, to the music of the 10-stringed lyre, and melody of the harp. For surely your enemies, Lord, surely your enemies will perish. My eyes have seen the defeat of my adversaries, my ears have heard the rout of my wicked foes. It's a combination of music and violence. The passage describes the defeat of the Lord's adversaries and compares it to music. This goes even further. Psalms 108. Who will bring me to the fortified city? Who will lead me to Edom? It is not you, God. You have rejected us, and no longer go out with our armies. Give us aid against the enemy, for human help is worthless. With God we will gain victory, and he will trample down our enemies. A leaderless vault after the overseer passed away from a rare skin cancer, Vault 108 was left with an army of clones who will trample anyone not a clone. Even the author admits this one was a bit of a stretch, but we continue. Psalm 77. I cried out to God for help. I cried out to God to hear me. When I was in distress, I sought the Lord. At night I stretched out my untiring hands, and I would not be comforted. Goes on further. The year when the Most High stretched out his right hand. With mighty arm you redeemed your people. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. It's just a lot of hand imagery for the vault that was filled with puppets and a single distressed man. Psalm 69. I am worn out calling for help. My throat is parched, my eyes fail, looking for my God. Those who hate me without reason outnumber the hairs of my head. Vault 69, notoriously known for having 999 women and a lone man. The narrator of this passage is outnumbered. It's still a bit of a reach, but it's something. Psalms 112. Blessed are those who fear the Lord, who find great delight in his commands. Their children will be mighty in the land. The generation of the upright will be blessed. Wealth and riches are in their houses, and their righteousness endures forever. The people stuck in Tranquility Lane simulation of Vault 112 endure forever in the simulation. Braun, the mastermind behind the simulation, is portrayed as a mighty child in command of all. These aren't the deepest connections, and there's never a big aha moment, but the amount of coincidences make this rabbit hole all the more interesting. Arsenalace has a couple more comparisons. Vault 106 made the dwellers lose their minds by putting psychoactive drugs into ventilation systems. Psalm 106 is about people forgetting their faith in God and being destroyed for it. And that's all the ones I feel like going over. There are a lot more from Fallout 3, and there are more from New Vegas that have some coincidences with their respective vaults. The point of the forum post was to make a prediction about Vault 111 before Fallout 4 was even released. Remember, the forum post was made in June 2015, and the Fallout 4 would be released in November 2015. Using the Book of Psalms, their hypothesis about Fallout 4 was that Vault 111 would be used by the Institute to house test subjects for their Android project, and that the sole survivor is either an android themselves or a test subject being stored before they go to become an android. It's pretty chilling stuff. With that out of the way, let's move on to Tier 9. New Vegas isn't canon. This is just a theory crafted by a toxic part of the fanbase that theorized Bethesda was attempting to make New Vegas non-canon. In reality, there's no evidence that Bethesda is trying to non-canonize Fallout New Vegas or any of the Black Isle Studio Fallout games for that matter. Just because Bethesda doesn't acknowledge the game doesn't mean they're trying to distance themselves from it. I interpret that as more of a sign of respect for the original creators. Bethesda games have all been set on the East Coast, and all of Black Isle Studios games, which would eventually become Obsidian, are set on the West Coast. To me, it seems like Bethesda doesn't want to touch the West Coast, not because they're trying to retcon it, but exactly the opposite. They don't want to touch the hard work of other writers and developers. So in short, New Vegas is still canon, no worries there. The Moon DLC. This one is a bit of a stretch, but people theorize that Fallout 4 was intended to have a DLC take place on the moon. The evidence for this is small and boils down to a mural in the Museum of Freedom that shows some astronauts fighting on the moon. A plaque nearby dedicated the mural to those who lost their lives at the Sea of Tranquility. The Sea of Tranquility is a name of a dark spot on the moon, so the plaque is describing a battle that took place on the moon. My guess is that the mural is just propaganda because I can't find another instance in all my research that corroborates a battle taking place on the moon. Nobark is the chosen one. I like this theory. I made a short video about Nobark earlier this year, and judging by the comments on it, it's a popular theory as well. The timeline matches up with it, putting the chosen one anywhere from 56 to 75 at the time of New Vegas, the time New Vegas starts. This aligns with how Nobark looks in-game as well. It would explain why he's so gosh darn rich too. The man just keeps putting up 1,000 caps of bets in Caravan. Vault-Tec started the Great War. Like Pam started the Great War theory, this ultimately doesn't change the games. In this case, however, it doesn't seem too profitable for Vault-Tec to actually start a war. It's like when you sell and buy insurance. The insurance company is wagering that nothing bad happens because then they'd have to pay out some money. So why would a company that is constructing fallout shelters want to drop bombs, stop the inflow of money, and ruin society as we know it? Why even take money from the government in the first place if you're just going to drop the nukes? People counter with that so that they could perform the experiments, but some vaults were already operating before the Great War. Vault 22, the plant vault, you remember those guys, right? That vault was in operation before the Great War started. They were doing research and trying to solve the problem of food shortages in pre-war America. And there was also Vault 88, the DLC vault, which was planned to start operating in 2078. Unfortunately, however, the sudden nuclear bombs put a hold on that. And in addition to that, Vault-Tec ran so many test drills with the vaults that people grew tired of the test drills. This created a whole cry wolf effect where people stopped listening to Vault air raid sirens because they thought that it was another test drill. The constant testing made it so that when the bombs actually did drop, vault populations were at a fraction of their intended size. I just don't buy into this idea. I don't like it. And don't even get me started on the megaton bomb and the one in the Mojave. I did this before in a previous video, but here's a look at the texture file for both bombs. Because, spoiler alert, they share the same texture because New Vegas reused textures from Fallout 3, and we zoom in on the little logo, and we can see a side-by-side that is not a Vault-Tec logo. With that being said, I will concede this. I had someone in my comments on that previous video I was talking about suggest that it could have been a logo of a different branch of Vault-Tec, and I can believe that. I could get behind that theory. Anyway, rant over. Maybe Vault-Tec did drop the bombs. I guess it just doesn't really matter. Shaun isn't your son. This is going back to the previous one at the top of the iceberg where Shaun is your son. This is the opposite of that. I believe that this theory comes from the suggestion of an alternative timeline to what Fallout 4 tells you through storytelling. Through the main story early on, you're led to believe that Shaun is taken from your spouse and that the sole survivor is looking for a child. However, you get a big aha moment when Father reveals to you that you were actually in cryostasis for a lot longer than you thought, and that Father is Shaun. The way to explain away Kellogg and Nick's memories of seeing a young Shaun is because the young Shaun was Synth Shaun. The Shaun is not your son theory is based on the idea that Father is lying to you this whole time. Father is actually impersonating your son, trying to make the sole survivor believe that he is your son. I guess the goal of the lies would be to pull on your heartstrings and get you to take over as the new leader of the Institute. The theory suggests that either Shaun was killed when his DNA was harvested for Gen 3 synths, or that the synth Shaun is the real Shaun. And that's it for actual real tiers on the iceberg. The final tier is a bit of a meme tier when it comes to gaming icebergs. I'll explain them as well, but first I just want to do some housekeeping. If you've made it this far in the video and haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing with your life? And if you have any other Fallout suggestions, or if I missed any theories, or if you have another gaming iceberg you want me to take a look at and research, feel free to comment. This was a lot of fun. Remember to like and subscribe, and let's move on to the final iceberg tier. Tier 10. Like I said before, this tier is kind of dedicated to memes of gaming icebergs. Benny is sentient. The blank is sentient theory is an overused but still creepy idea that a certain video game character in a franchise is actually aware that they're in a video game. And if you try to come at me and say that it's not overused, they literally made a movie about this, albeit it's a comedy, but Free Guy is about a video game character gaining sentience. I'm not sure exactly the first use of the blank is sentient is from, but it's likely an early creepypasta, probably like Mario 64 or something. There's no real reason I can see why it would be Benny over any other character to become sentient. Maybe it's creepier because he's the first main antagonist you see in the game. The Easy Pete apparition. I think this refers to an old Super Mario 64 myth where personalized copies of Super Mario 64 had a large image of Wario appear in the room, which leads to the level Dire Dire Docks. Once the Wario apparition sees you, it would begin chasing you down an endless hallway. The disembodied head would start chomping and laughing maniacally. Apparently the Wario may take on a disfigured form, and it's said that after experiencing the Wario apparition, the player would suffer stroke-like symptoms and memory loss. The New Vegas version of the Wario apparition is, of course, the Easy Pete apparition. But like I said, it's just a meme. I don't think anyone's found an Easy Pete apparition. Yet. I'm just kidding. Unless. And lastly, every copy of New Vegas is personalized. Another big myth / creepypasta in gaming circles is the personalization theory. It goes that every player's copy of a game has some small, slight changes that make the events personalized. An advanced AI tailors the game so that it's more appealing to you, even in ways you might not notice. It might be that the names of the characters are different, or that they have different dialogue choices, or maybe even a different appearance entirely. It might be that the locations are in different spots. Maybe Boone laughs a little more, maybe Veronica's more confident, maybe House looks a little bit more like his initial picture. Don't worry, Old Vegas House can't hurt you. He's not real. Anyway, that's all the time I'll take from you today. Again, if you enjoyed the video and got to the end, sauce a like, sauce a subscription, maybe even sauce a comment on what you'd like to see next. Take care, folks. Have a good one.
To relay with Shaun.
Bye, Mr. Kellogg. I hope I see you again soon.
Bye.